السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين. O ye who believe, when the call is made for prayer on Friday, hasten to the remembrance of Allah and leave off all business. That is better for you if only you knew. And when the prayer is finished, then disperse in the land and seek of Allah's grace and remember Allah much so that you may prosper. Or when they see some merchandise or some amusement, they break out for it and leave thee standing. Say that Allah is that which is with Allah is better than amusement and merchandise, and Allah is the best provider. Today, by the grace of Allah, this is the last Friday in the holy month of Ramadan, and it has now become a tradition or an innovation. People have this terminology that the last Friday in the month of Ramadan is that which they're bidding farewell to the Ramadan. And they call it the Bait-ul-Aafiyat, the last Friday in which we're bidding farewell to the month of Ramadan. But it's good to remember that this does not find place in the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. And there is no such thing as Bait-ul-Aafiyat, in which we are now saying that Alhamdulillah, we had a great Ramadan, and by the grace of Allah, this is the last Friday in the month of Ramadan, so let's go out in our numbers and fill the masajid, the mosques, and bid farewell to this beautiful month that we've all come and experienced, and then we go back to business. This goes against the spirit of the purpose of Friday, as in the verse that I read, Surah Al-Jumu'ah. It says chapter 62 of the Holy Quran, verses 10 to 12. In these verses, Allah Almighty has told us that no matter what the situation might be, no matter what we are occupied in our business and in our other trades, that we must attend the Friday prayer. And any time of the year, it doesn't specify which time of the year, it says any time of the year, as long as you are a Muslim, and for men specifically, Allah Almighty has made the Friday prayer obligatory upon all of us, that we should stop whatever we're doing, and this is a commandment, and we should rush towards the Salat when we are called towards the Salat, and this is referring to the believers. So for those who are employed, it is possible that they may feel that they are facing some financial loss due to their attendance at the Friday prayers, that, I've closed down my shop, or, I've taken time off, it's an hour or two, I could have been working. Something might tell you that if I do this every Friday, of course it's a working hour, I'll be losing. But it's because of this same thought that Shaitan whispers in our hearts, and we think that apparently we are losing, because that's what is obvious. If you leave work, you don't get paid for it. So we do feel sometimes that, well, I could have been at work instead of coming here and just listening to a 25-30 minute sermon, praying, and then going back, or they could give you that extra hour, double your wage, or whatever it might be. And apparently you feel that this is going away. This is a norm. This is something that anyone would feel that they're losing. But it's because of that same reason that Allah Almighty does tell us that something should happen after we offer this Friday prayer. And that is, when the prayer is complete, now go about and disperse and spread in the world and seek of the blessings of Allah. Meaning that during the Friday prayer, that time that we do not take off and we're still at work, whatever it is that we're doing, that is outside of the bounties and the blessings of Allah. Because it says if you want those blessings of Allah, they will come to you after you've offered your Jummah prayer. After you've prayed the Friday prayer, then He now says, if you offer your Friday prayers, then you go out seeking and looking for what you need, not just what you think you want. Then He says, in those hours, you will find the blessings of Allah and the bounties of Allah. Now seek of those bounties, but then also remember Allah. Remember Allah, because وَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ, you seek of those blessings of Allah. وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ, and remember Allah, and so that you may become successful. And this now tells us that after you've now offered your Jummah prayers, you're rushing back to work. You said, well, I've put in those hours for Jummah, alhamdulillah, now I'm good for the rest of the day. Allah then warns us and reminds us that remember Allah as well. So the rest of the prayers that come during the day, the next prayer is the Asr, you also have to serve that time as well. You don't just say, well, the Jummah is what I've been called towards, I've offered it, now I'm going back to work. The rest of the salats don't matter, because the Jummah is what is very important this day. And He warns us against that as well, and says that after you have completed your Friday prayer, now you're going about looking for those blessings of Allah. If you need those blessings, then وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا, then remember Allah as well. And we know that the best form of remembrance of Allah is our salah. So if you miss that Asr prayer or that Maghrib prayer due to that same work, that work is nothing else for you but Satan. It's nothing else for you but distracting you from your purpose, and that is the true worship of Allah Almighty. And for those of us who, alhamdulillah, were engaged in intensive prayers during the month of Ramadan, for those of us that multiplied our worship, especially in the last 10 days of Ramadan, we reminded ourselves throughout the month of Ramadan, the attendance at the masjid, alhamdulillah, has increased, the recitation of the Holy Quran, the tahajjud prayers, and all these different things that we are all engaged in by the grace of Allah. We truly have, or we should feel, that there is some change that is about to come in us. So some of those who are fortunate might tell you that they do feel that change in themselves. They do feel that improvement in themselves, and we're all at different levels. But we should remember that becoming close to Allah is for the purpose that we do not give preference to our faith over our worldly affairs. It's important that we give precedence to our faith. And therefore, it shouldn't be that we only pray to Allah when we're in need of something. Because we are told that in the last 10 days of Ramadan, there is Laylatul Qadr, and that worship in that one night is better than 1,000 months. Therefore, we increase our efforts, especially in the last 10 days and in the odd nights. We all want to have those blessings. We pray hard. We tell Allah Almighty all our needs. We ask Him. But again, as we had discussed before, we have to understand our relationship with Allah. What is it that our role is, and what is it that is Allah's role in terms of praying for Him, praying to Him? When we are praying to Allah Almighty and you have a need, and now this is so important to you, that you're looking for that Laylatul Qadr and you're praying for this thing that you need so much, You've given so much time by coming to the masjid, especially in those last 10 days. This Ramadan comes with a lot of blessings. We have to understand that our role in that prayer is that we are servants. We are slaves, and it is Allah that's the master. So when we are asking Allah Almighty, we should remember that we are not demanding. We are asking something that we are completely undeserving of. We are asking from a master that owns everything, and it is completely up to him whether he wants to give or not to give. And not to give meaning at that point in time, probably that's not the best thing for you. So that spirit of prayer and dua needs to be kept in mind whenever we engage in dua, whenever we engage in true worship. To say, I am only a servant, I have nothing. And Allah is the best provider. He is the one that should give to me, if He desires to give to me at a certain point in time. So Laylatul Qadr, when we are seeking this great blessing, this great night, and we do get up and increase our worship for those people who have been trying to experience this Laylatul Qadr, and we still have at least a couple of chances left, inshallah, for Allah Almighty to give us the blessings of the Laylatul Qadr. We must remember the spirit that is in this blessed night, and the spirit that the Holy Prophet ﷺ showed towards this. And what did he do after the month of Ramadan? And this is the important part. What has Ramadan done for us? What is it that Ramadan has changed in us? What is it that we have achieved after we've experienced this blessed month? And the answer is different for every person. If throughout the month of Ramadan, I say to myself that, well, I have decided to take a couple of hours from work to come and break my fast in the masjid, pray my Maghrib prayers, pray Isha, and do Taraweeh sometimes, and then go back home. And I'm able to do this every day because of the blessings of Ramadan. If I'm able to come to the masjid somehow every day, or at least 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week, then that means Ramadan was indeed important for me. Then that means in the month of Ramadan, I have understood the spirit of the importance of worship. That means I've never had a doubt that Allah does exist. I've never had a doubt that He listens to prayers. I've never had a doubt that Salat is important. I've never had a doubt that coming to the masjid is extremely important, because now we have proven to ourselves that in the month of Ramadan, I will do this, which means I have the time to go to the masjid actually for throughout the year. But if you were taking half an hour off work so you can come to the masjid in the month of Ramadan, and after the month of Ramadan, now you feel that, well, I have to go and do those extra hours, I've lost some work or a few dollars here and there. Now that Ramadan has ended, I'll run back to work and double my efforts. Then Ramadan has not really come to you. Then you have really not experienced Ramadan. Because the spirit and the purpose of this month is so that we are able to empower ourselves in such a way that the rest of the 11 months of the year, we would be able to push and continue with this consistency. If you are able to come to the mosque every day, by the end of Ramadan, you shouldn't look forward to that weakness in you to say, I cannot wait for Ramadan to end so that I can go back to work and focus and not come to the masjid. That means you have not achieved the purpose of Ramadan. That means you have not understood the spirit of Ramadan. Because if Ramadan had really come to you, at the end of Ramadan, you should be saying that, Alhamdulillah, I'm able to come to the masjid so many times. I'm able to pray so many times. I'm able to recite the Holy Quran so many times. Now, by the grace of Allah, I look forward to increasing the number of hours that I spend in the masjid, or the number of minutes, or the number of times that I recite the Holy Quran. This, in fact, is what we should be looking forward to. How have we improved ourselves in our worship? Have we increased in our spirituality? How have we changed towards something more positive? Not saying how do we fall back. And this, unfortunately, happens on the first day that Ramadan ends, and that's the day of Eid. Mostly, that's when we are now in celebration mode, and we go right back into those old ways, and even worse in some cases, forgetting that we just spent 30 days trying to empower and enhance ourselves. Now that Eid has come, we've completely dropped so low that we miss our prayers, and so many other things. So Ramadan would not have come to you at that point in time, because the Holy Prophet ﷺ had said, إِذَا جَاءَ Ramadan, that when Ramadan comes, and again for every person this applies differently. When Ramadan comes to you, when you have experienced Ramadan, and now that it has ended, there's certain things that you must have achieved in this month of Ramadan. Otherwise, you've lagged seriously. And he says, when Ramadan does come to every individual, he says, فُتِحَتْ أَبْوَابُ الْجَنَّةِ, that the doors of heaven are open. So if Ramadan has come to you and you feel that you've experienced this 29, 30 days, you fasted all the days, you've prayed the way you're supposed to pray, the Holy Prophet ﷺ says that the doors of heaven would have opened for you. And we all know that the doors of heaven aren't open towards someone who runs away from Salat and from the masjid and started running to Salat and to the masjid. So if Ramadan has come to you and the doors of heaven have opened out for you, you would have been able to increase yourself in prayer, in your worship, in your ibadah. And we do know that this is what we find in the life of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. His worship was not when he was demanding from Allah. This is something that a servant enjoys. This is something that becomes the trade of a servant. It's a continuous cycle that he looks forward to every day and every moment. And he says, وَغُلِّقَتْ أَبْوَابُ النَّارِ, that the doors of hell are shut and are closed. So all those things that lead us to sin and lead us towards hellfire, the Holy Prophet ﷺ says that if Ramadan has indeed come to you and you feel that you've experienced Ramadan, then every act that would pull you towards hell, towards the displeasure of Allah Almighty, you would have developed a dislike for it. You would have hated it at this point in time, at the end of the 29 to 30 days. If Ramadan did indeed come to you, you would have been able to run away from, at least recognize and see anything that pulls you towards sin and towards the fire. At that time, the doors would have been shut for you. And that's not only in the month of Ramadan, but even after Ramadan had ended and you have practiced so much, at this point you would have gained that strength. وَصُدِّفَتِ الشَّيَاطِينَ, and Satan would be locked in shackles and in chains. When Ramadan truly comes to you, you would have developed some sort of strength to be able to battle and fight against those satanic thoughts and desires that come to our minds. As the Holy Prophet ﷺ says, that everyone does have a Satan in them. And for me, I have made mine a Muslim. This month of Ramadan is to strengthen us and to give us that mechanism and to give us that those weapons that we are able to fight against Satan. And as the Holy Prophet ﷺ has said, when Ramadan comes to you, as an individual, you would have developed these three things. The doors of heaven would have been open wide for you, and the doors of hell would have been shut for you, and Satan would have been locked up for you, to be able to not to have access to you. And by the end of Ramadan, especially in the last 10 days of fasting, the expectation is that at this point, we do not just come to the masjid because you feel that you have to fulfill a responsibility. Not to come to the masjid to say, well, I tick all the boxes, I've offered my 5 daily prayers, or I've come to the masjid 3 times, that's great. By the end of Ramadan, you would have developed a different taste. And that taste is, you would have started enjoying worship. You would have started loving the fact that now I want to go to the masjid because this is best for me. I've seen the blessings of it. I've experienced the blessings of it in Ramadan. So for the rest of the 11 months, I should be able to push myself. It shouldn't be so hard. It shouldn't be so difficult. If on Thursday, coming to the masjid, this coming Thursday, coming to the masjid is so difficult for you, then that means we've wasted Ramadan truly. If for the rest of the year, getting in your car and starting it is like, man, forget it, I'll just watch TV. That means we've wasted an entire month because it has brought no change to us whatsoever. Because again, the spirit we should understand is that of a slave and a master. And I'll give an example of Hazrat Zayd, who was the adopted son of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. First, he was a slave. And he was a slave that was sold to different people, and then he found himself in the household of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of course, we all know Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam freed him. Didn't allow him to stay as a slave under him, so he freed him. But this person was living with the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for a long time, and his parents, who had come from a different place, were traveling, looking for him because he had been enslaved and been sold to different people. And they heard news that your son Zayd is now with a man called Muhammad, who lives in such and such place. So they went there with the desire that they would buy their son back, because they had lost him for so many years. Now we'll be able to buy him and then take him with us, take him home. But at that time, Hazrat Zayd was free. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we all know, freed everyone that came under him as a slave. So he freed him. So they didn't need to buy him. All he had to do was go back home. So his parents were there and his relatives. When they met him, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them, no, this man is free. He's your son, just take him, go away with him. But Hazrat Zayd radiallahu anhu had a role to play here, because he understood that this man Muhammad now is my master, was my master, and now he's like a father to me. The attachment with the Holy Prophet ﷺ was such that he told his parents, look, I love you and I love the place that I come from, but at this point in time I have no desire to go with you. This is someone that I love and I want to spend the rest of my life with. And they were crying that, you are a son, let's go back home. He said, I don't want to go back home. I'm not compelled, I'm not being forced, I'm completely free, I can, but I will not go. And this is the spirit we need to have. If this man can have such a love for a human being, this is the kind of love, or more than this, that we should have for our Creator. If we have dedicated the 30 days of Ramadan to Allah so much, and we have truly focused in our worship, and we truly believe that we have experienced Ramadan, now that we are quote unquote free to do whatever we want, we should be able to stick around like as Zayd did with the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and say, well, I can go about and do whatever I want, but Ramadan has changed me. The love of the Holy Prophet ﷺ changed Hazrat Zayd's heart, that he did not want to go with his own parents. So if Ramadan has ended, and we indeed were able to establish some sort of relationship with Allah, we should have no desire to run to Satan now, if we have tasted of that love of Allah. There is no way that we could have established some relationship with Allah. It could be 1%, as minor as it might be. You might have tasted something in the month of Ramadan that you see that this is a blessing, that Allah exists. If we truly did fast for His sake only. At this point, how is it possible that Eid is on Wednesday and on Thursday we all run away from the masjid and not show up? We only show up on a Friday. How is it possible? How can you convince yourself that you just went through a whole month of exercise, of spiritual exercise, of being hungry, of being thirsty for an entire month? How do we convince ourselves that we sincerely did this? There is no way. It would be nothing else but hypocrisy. At least that's how I understand it. So these are blessings that we have to be deserving of. No one is born a Muslim and just automatically just falls under a certain category because you've said the kalima la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Every day of our lives needs to be testimony to this fact that we're making this statement. Every day of our lives we need to prove to ourselves that we're deserving of these blessings. Allah Almighty does not desire or does not want any one of us as an individual. We have to be deserving of those blessings. There's so many people in this world who are obedient, disobedient, and all sorts of people. But we could have been anything. Every day we are free to decide where we go, what we do. Call yourself a Muslim, call yourself an atheist, call yourself a Buddhist. Every moment of your life you have an option. Right now you can just get up and run out. No one's probably even going to ask you. But if you're making that effort of coming to the masjid, calling yourself a believer, then Allah Almighty tells us that there are just certain expectations. You're either in or you're out. And we all understand where we stand better than anyone else. We can show a face here, we can say whatever we want, but Allah knows best. And we all know where we stand. So if we're making that conscious decision every day of getting up and calling ourselves believers and putting ourselves in that fold, in that circle, then it does come with certain responsibilities. And if we want those blessings, then we have to do certain things to be deserving of those blessings. That's just how it works. So by the end of Ramadan, the reminder here is that when that Eid comes, then do we just forget and get ready and get engaged in partying and festivities, and we forget the whole purpose of what we just experienced? If we are making plans right now to travel to our relatives in different cities and in different states, then we need to be mindful. Because the Holy Prophet, the Holy Quran says, "Hafizu ala salawati wa salatul wusta," that you need to be mindful of your prayers, especially the middle prayer. And of course, that salatul wusta, the middle prayer, applies to different people in different ways. Just that prayer that comes in between your activities, where you have to sacrifice a moment to go out and pray. That specifically, Allah Almighty says, protect all your prayers, but especially salatul wusta, that middle prayer that comes in the middle of our activities and our affairs, where we have to stop and go and pray. He says, be mindful of that, because that's indeed very important. So as we prepare for this very important festival, we call it the Eid. How do we celebrate it? What are the do's and don'ts? And again, certain results should have been experienced by us, in our families, at least one or two individuals. If I see that my mother or my father is going all out and doing this great shopping to make food for 7 people, they're making it for 25 people, then it becomes my responsibility to remind them that the spirit of the Holy Prophet ﷺ in the month of Ramadan was generous. But his generosity was not towards people that have anyway. And we all know the norm. Generally, they say, show me your friend and I'll tell you who you are. The norm is that if you are a $100,000 person a year, on the day of Eid, you're likely to invite someone that gets $100,000. And that's not generosity, that doesn't count. And the Holy Prophet ﷺ's generosity in the month of Ramadan was such that the Sahaba explained that it intensified. It was like a fast-blowing wind that just carries anything that comes along with it. It was like a storm. That's how his generosity was in the month of Ramadan. So if we just experience Ramadan for 30 days, and our generosity, this should have been the level of our generosity. And now on the day of Eid, we are inviting 20, 30 people who don't need that meal, and we're making food for 50 people when we're expecting, 10 people. And then the end of that night of Eid, you are taking all that food and putting it in the trash. We should just remember, what did we just do? We should have been generous. The Holy Prophet ﷺ says to his companions, when you're making that food, add more water to it so you can give some to your neighbors. Or if you live in a neighborhood where there's no poor person, where everyone has a mansion, maybe they don't need that food. But remember that this house that you come to worship, just across the road, we all know the condition of this place. There are people who could have used that meal when we were putting it in the trash. And these are the kind of spirits we need to understand. We need to truly ask ourselves if Ramadan has come to us. If after 30 days of fasting, on the day of Eid, this is what we are planning to do, to make so much food that at the end of the day we'll end up throwing away half of it, because the guest would say, well, there was so much food that we couldn't finish it, then that is not the spirit of Ramadan. That is completely contrary to it. That would, your nafs, your deeper soul would have told you that you just wasted your time in eating and drinking, but your action is completely opposite of it. But like I said, not all of us are on that level. If it's the mother that has that understanding, alhamdulillah, because of the month of Ramadan, she should play that role of reminding the husband that we don't need all of this on the day of Eid. If it's the husband that has experienced that and has learned a lesson, he should tell his wife that we don't need all this food and all this partying on the day of Eid. If it's the child who has experienced that in the month of Ramadan, he or she should remind his or her parents that this is not what we need on the day of Eid. This is not the spirit of Eid after we have experienced the month of Ramadan. And of course, we also know that in visiting our families and our relatives, and even the preparations of the food on the day of Eid and everything that happens, so many prayers that we miss on the day of Eid itself, after we have just gone through such an intensive activity, we forget the most basic responsibilities. Hafizu ala salawat, just protect your prayers. Remember to fulfill the responsibility of your salah. And I'll end again with salat, with almost certainty that we are, alhamdulillah, we've all experienced the numbers here in this masjid and in other masajid throughout the city, throughout the country, in fact throughout the whole world, that in Ramadan we have increased the attendance, we have increased the numbers. But it's almost with certainty that this masjid could stand as a testimony to the fact that it will be completely empty after the month of Ramadan. It's almost certain. But again, if we have truly experienced Ramadan, that's the same jobs that we're doing, the same schools that we're going to. Somehow we have managed to come to the masjid in the month of Ramadan. Somehow, for iftar, for taraweeh, whatever it is that brought you to the masjid, it's the same job you're doing, the same school that you're going to. Let's make a commitment now to say once a day, or at least 4 or 5 times a week, I will not just fall back to zero and only come here on Jummah, on Friday. If Maghrib is the time that works for you because you made it here for iftar somehow throughout the month, then make a commitment that you'll be here every Maghrib prayer. If it's too early for you, make a commitment you'll be here every Isha prayer. If it's too late for you, make a commitment you'll be here after every Fajr prayer. But some commitment needs to be made before we close the chapter of this month of Ramadan and start looking forward to the next Ramadan to show up to the masjid. May Allah Almighty protect all of us from falling so short in our responsibilities. And we can already see, pretty much almost be sure of the fact that the numbers will definitely decrease. But may Allah Almighty enable all of us individually to recognize this responsibility and commit ourselves to be one of those few people who will continue to come to the masjid and make prayer important and give preference to our faith over our worldly affairs. And these last few days that are left, may Allah Almighty enable all of us to intensify our prayers, to strengthen us in a way that our worship and our responsibilities we do recognize throughout the rest of the 11 months that will come to us in the year, inshallah.